Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Politdigm podcast. My name is Red, and today I'm joined by my co-host Alpha.
I was about to say once again I am present another time.
Yeah, you're doing the thing again.
Yeah,
You remember this
yeah,
time?
I am here.
Yes.
Sleepy as all hell, but I'm here.
Yeah, and I am also here and a little more energized than usual. But I don't know. I did have PE, I don't know. Uh, I'm usually more tired. I don't know. I am pretty tired, but I'm also not tired. I don't know how to explain it.
I am
Uh,
exhausted. I am running on three coffees. So
yeah. Anyways, today is the 16th of October, which is a Monday, which means that a couple of hours ago, the blog came out. This was Alpha's week, and as we said at the end of the last episode, we are going to be talking about the current situation with Palestine and Israel, or not the current situation, just the
yeah,
situation regarding that. But before we do, of course, we have to do our honorary plug
plug it.
of plugging our Patreon. Of course, if you want to support us and enjoy our content, you can support us over at Patreon, where you'll get access to some nice little things. One of them being a access to a private area of our Discord server, our private free Discord server. But
Yep.
if you support us through Patreon, you get access to some private channels where you can, for example, submit questions to our podcast Q&A, where at the end of each episode, we will try to answer your questions as best as we can. And there's other stuff there. I don't even remember. There's more than that. Hold up.
Yeah, remember everyone. The Discord, while Red is double checking everything, the Discord server is free. There is a
Yeah,
public chat
I
that you can
already
just
said
in
that.
and join. Shush. Um,
Yeah, there's
so
also there's you can submit content ideas, so stuff we can talk about, either being specific topics, for example, talk to write about and then talk in a podcast, or just generally like an actual new type of content. You also have access to our debates channel, which is going to be a cesspool of
that one is gonna be fun.
yeah, and then you also have a specific general chat if you want to, only speak to the people who support us and not talk to the rest. I don't know why, but sure. And then of course you also get access to early announcements, which is always nice to get access to the latest news before everybody else. So with that said, let's get into the actual topic of this week. Go ahead, Alpha.
Okay, so this topic has been requested by a few people,
Yeah.
and even a friend that currently listens to the podcast. Shout out to you. You know who you are. Now, before we dive into this one, there are a couple of things that I would like to say. Three big disclaimers. First of all, and I think this one's pretty obvious, we are not experts. We are two random people that did a week of research, a lot of research in my case, about a topic, and are going from a normal people point of view going to disclose said topic. We don't know everything. There is a huge gap in my knowledge in a certain portion of time, and as such, if you want to know more about this conflict, which you should, do your own research. I plugged all of the sources that I use in the most accessible way possible. So
Yeah, and
you
if you
have
and
all
if you want access to them, you can go to the
the
blog,
blog.
and at the
Yeah.
end there's a list of all the sources. There's 20 of them, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's 20
So
sources.
get ready to
So
do a lot of reading. Get your reading glasses ready.
I encourage you to do your own research. Second of all, and I think I can speak for both of us, we here at Politdigm firmly stand with Palestine.
Yeah,
We support Palestine. We don't support Hamas, but we support the rights of the Palestinian people.
yeah. I think that it's very important to say that, of course, which is something you'll
Are
understand during the episode. But of course, what Hamas does is pretty bad. However, we do,
horrendous.
support. We do not we do support Palestine. I think that it's very important to say. And whilst we do understand what Hamas is doing in the point of view of their reasoning behind it, we of course their solutions and their actions do not exactly align with what we believe in.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
mean,
like
saying
bit of
that they don't exactly align with what we believe in, I think is a pretty big understatement. We are firmly against their actions. At least I am. A lot of them. So, of course, I wanted to disclose that we are not unbiased. We
yeah.
have bias towards Palestine. So,
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind, kind of going into the first thing that Alpha said, is that of course this is something that we have mentioned before, but we are not uh, we're not a news article. We're not journalists. We're not historians. So of course what we say can be incorrect. So of course take it with a grain of salt. But of course
a
we
bucket of salt.
huh?
Take it with a bucket of
I don't
salt.
know if it's that going to be that bad, but of course if you
We do
do
have
know.
pretty bad takes. I have some pretty bad takes a lot of the time. So,
So of course if there is something that we say that is incorrect, of course we want to be corrected. Make sure that when you do correct us that there is that you actually know what you're talking about, and don't just
be polite about it.
and be polite about it, and don't just think like, oh, what you said is so dumb and you are dumb because I've never heard of what you said, therefore it must be wrong. And then I'm going to leave a comment saying how dumb you are because what you said is such a stretch because that is not like that because I've never heard of it, therefore it must not be true.
Align with my worldviews. Therefore, it is not true.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a bit of our disclaimer. So yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead, Alpha.
Last thing,
Oh,
there have been a lot of protests around the world uh, that claim their support for Palestine and Israel, and a big argument has been used by those that support Israel is that if you don't support Israel,
you support terrorism.
you're yeah, and you're a Nazi, which is dumb as shit, because there are a lot of Jewish people that don't support the actions of Israel. There are some Jewish people in Israel that don't support the actions of Israel.
Yeah, and
So
there's a clear distinction between a Jewish people and Israeli people. These are two different groups, right? Of course, most people who live in Israel are Jewish. But of course, when you say that we don't support Israel, doesn't mean that we hate Jewish people. Those are
yeah,
very different, distinct things. One thing is
it
not
is
supporting a government
wrong.
in an apartheid state, which is what that is. Another thing is saying that we don't support it because they are Jewish. No, that is not what is happening. Like we
It
do
is
not support
beyond
it.
stupid.
We do not support it because of how they what are their actions, because of the fact that they're a far right government, and generally their politics. But we have nothing against them because they are Jewish, and of course there's going to be people who don't support Israel because they're anti-Semitic. But that is saying that the fact that we at Politdigm don't support Israel, therefore we are anti-Semitic, is dumb. So just saying that.
Yeah. Okay. That being said, what will be the objective of this podcast? It will be to, in layman's terms, talk about the history of Israel and Palestine in the modern age, meaning the late 19th century and 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century.
And how we got here today,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. The beginning of the 21st century will be how we got here today.
Yeah.
So I did my best with this topic. I am extremely tired because I spent 3 days researching and one entire day writing a blog, which I couldn't finish in that one day. So I have a lot of notes and a lot to go through. Are you ready?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So I I think the most important thing to realize is the importance of Israel in Jewish belief. Uh, in the beginning, I'm talking centuries before Christ. Israel was the second kingdom. There was another one, which was Judah, that had Jerusalem as a capital, and it's where the Jewish people got their name, the people from Judah. Now, Israel and Judah were invaded a lot of the times. Their temples were destroyed. Then they got reconquered. The Jewish people moved back in. And then in the first century CE, that's current era, uh, the Romans basically reinvaded Israel and kicked out most of the Jewish people that lived there. As such, Jewish people dispersed all over the world, and a theme of returning to Israel, returning to Zion, which is a synonym, became really ingrained in their belief. The idea that they weren't just a group of people that shared the same religion, but also uh, a national group, a group of people that had the birthplace, and that was Israel. So, with now let's go back to the 19th century. Europe. A lot of Jewish people in Europe. You know what else there was a lot of in Europe?
Racism.
Anti-Semitism.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, you were close. You were close.
I mean,
So
anti-Semitism is just a form of racism. So
yeah, it's so stupid. But we're not gonna get into that right now. So as anti-Semitism kept rising in Europe, a lot of Jewish people um, endured it, still lived in Europe, but there were also those that moved into Israel and created small settlements to the point where, in the beginning of the 20th century, about 90% of the population was Arab, but the other 10%, if I'm not mistaken, were European settlers or something like that. Now, at this point of time, a new way of thinking and political ideology movement started developing within Jewish culture and Jewish groups, which was called Zionism. Zionism.
Zionism.
Zion. Yeah, thank you. Which is the idea exactly that Jewish people aren't just a group of people that share the same religion, but a group of people that share nationality, and as such, they should have a state where they can all live and call a home. Now, there was one man which really pushed this ideology forward, especially when it came to the political movement, and he has such a weird name, Theodore Herzl, if I'm not mistaken. And he was the one that helped make Zionism known to the world, started councils about it. There were a lot of meetings with a lot of really important people in Jewish circles meant to try and figure out where they should establish a new state so that the Jewish people could live in. There were a couple of options presented. The British even presented them with an option which they later refused. But it all came to a close when, in 1917, once again, the British um, told them that they approved of the migration of Jewish people to Palestine so that they could settle there. Now let's go and explore why the British took this stance. This was all written in a letter, by the way, in 1917. Now, the British during World War One had another big enemy, which had always been a thorn in their ass, which was the Ottoman Empire. To the point
I thought you were gonna say the French.
that too, but that comes later. Now, the Ottoman Empire ruled over the Middle East for over 400 years now. And the British really wanted them gone, to the point where they went to Arab leaders and told them, hey, if you rise up against the Ottomans, we will give you independence and the right to lead your people, which you can actually see in this little known movie called Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah. So, Palestine was also under the rule of the Ottomans. And once again, the British really wanted them gone. That and lobbying from Russian people and other pressures also coming from the United States in the idea that they could turn against them because of anti-Semitism during the World War and ally with Germany. They all decided that the best course of action was to grab all the Jewish people and put them in this new state of Palestine with the condition that they would help them. As such, in 1918, the British Army, together with the Jewish Legion, which was a faction of the army that had, you guessed it, Jewish people, to occupied Palestine. Now, the people that lived there weren't all that happy, but shit hadn't yet hit the fan. That happened when, in 1920, the British and the French, here they come, divided the territory that they had gained with the takeover of these Arab people in the Middle East, and Palestine was a little like blob that didn't fit quite well in the southwest of each other's border. So the British gained command of Palestine and started calling it the Mandatory Palestine. After, and they basically became the leaders and the government of Mandatory Palestine. Now, as you can imagine, the Arab people living there weren't really that happy. First of all, they had a new influx of people that were buying their land, and then the British come knocking at their door saying that they own the country. It's just a lot of levels of bad. So they started revolting. Once again, in 1920. They started revolting, and there were, if I'm not mistaken, five deaths, three Jewish people and two Arabic people, something like that, and a lot of wounded. And because they were also not only revolting against the British, but also the Jewish people, because they also thought that they were at fault and it was a form of colonization by the Europeans. As a response, the Jewish people formed a militia called, oh my god, I'm gonna butcher this word so bad, Haganah? Haganah.
Could be, could be.
Haganah. I don't know.
Hold up,
Something
I'll
like
Google
that.
it. I'll Google it.
Yeah. Okay. Which was once again a militia from which then sprouted a lot of other militia groups that would be important later. Now, in 1922,
Haganah. Yeah, that's probably how it's spelled.
yeah,
Haganah.
1922, the British finally gained the full access and rule over the Israel, Palestine, by the Mandate for Palestine. And things kind of were rocky, people weren't that happy, but we weren't at the worst point yet. That came between the 1920s and 1930s with the Nazis, because it's always about the fucking Nazis. So, Nazi ideology has taken root in Europe. It's the most anti-Semitic we have ever been in the history of the world. I think I might be wrong. At least in the modern age, it sure as shit was. Um, and as such, Jewish people want to get the fuck out of Dodge, and a lot of them turned to Palestine so that they could start a new life. There was a specific name for this movement of people. I'm not gonna try to pronounce it. It's in the blog. But what's important to know is that there was an influx of over 350,000 Jewish people to
God damn.
Palestine in about 20 years. And now you reach a point where the Arab population of Palestine owned 20% of the land, the Jewish people owned 6% of the land, and the rest was owned by other forms of government, British. Oh my god, the Arabs were not happy about this, as I think would be an understatement, to the point where they started revolting. This would be known as the Arab Revolts, very original, which took place between 1936 and 1939. Now, the Arab militias were completely stomped by the Jewish militia that I talked about, Haganah, I'm pretty sure, together with the might of the British Army, and they lost. They lost pretty hard, to the point where about 10% of the male population of Arab Palestinians were either killed, imprisoned, or exiled. But the British were not too happy with the violence that was occurring in their mandatory state. So they basically said, okay, okay, let's put a stop to this. There will be no more legal Jewish migration into Palestine, which was taken into effect by this thing called the White Paper, and this all happened in 1939, which is also the war. Today, it's the year where World War One. Well, my God, I can't speak today. It's the year where World War Two starts, where the most influx of migrating Jewish people took place, to the point where there were specific organizations and clandestine movements called oh my god, oh my god, Aliyabet. I don't know, Alyah. I don't know. The movement basically tried to help Jewish people migrate uh, illegally to Palestine. They would put them on these giant boats, take them over the coasts, and help them get out. A lot of them were stopped by the British Navy, which also led to a lot of Jewish people being extremely mad because their people were being slaughtered and they couldn't get safe haven. So it was the time for the British to get their shit stopped. The Jewish insurgents occurred between 1946 and 1947. It started with a bombardment of a government building, and it was a bunch of guerrilla fighting between Jewish militias and the British army. It all culminated to its end when a couple of Jewish militia soldiers were captured. Their execution was planned and announced, and so the Jewish militia captured two British sergeants and said, "You kill our guys, we kill yours." The British killed the Palestinians. My God, the British killed the Jewish killed the British, hanged their bodies, and booby trapped the site, which wounded a soldier when they found the bodies. So Britain looked at this and said, yeah, fuck no, it's not worth the trouble. And they turned to the UN, which had been formatted in the same year, 1947, and said, yo, help me, please. And the UN came up with the resolution 181, which basically had the objective of trying to mitigate the problems within Palestine. Now, the proposal was meant to give Jewish people a state, meant to give Palestinians independence, and allow the British to leave. Now, the Jewish people were pretty happy with this. They thought, finally, we get our state, and it's about 50% of the land of Palestine. But the Palestinians weren't too happy about this because, wait, you get your state and 50% of our land. So they refused all the agreements and said, no, no, if Jewish people live here, it will be under unified Arabic rule. This led to other problems, and the British just said, yeah, fuck this, we're leaving. And the mandatory that gave us power over Palestine is becoming null on the 15th of May of 1948. And so the Jewish insurgents was at its highest. There was still conflict, but things calmed down. And then, the day before the British mandate expired, the Jewish head of state, the head of the Jewish agency, forgive me, declared that a Jewish state in Eretz Israel would become the state of Israel, and it would be an independent state. And everyone lost their minds. This whole thing started what would be known as the Arab-Israeli War, because the neighboring countries of Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and Transjordan looked at this and said, no, you will not become an independent state. This is just another form of European colonialism, and we will not allow it. And they all launched an offensive. It did not go well for them, to the point where the Israelis not only fought back, they also claimed a lot of the territory that had been given to the Palestinians by the UN as part of the agreement. So now, the only Palestinian settlements that you could find in Israel were what would be later known as Gaza and West Bank. After, 1 year after, in 1949, the countries agreed to a ceasefire. There were never actual peace documents signed, but they all stopped attacking each other, at least for the most part. This was also when the border of Israel with Egypt was formed, which was known as the Green Line, which was highly controversial at the time. But still, things were looking okay for Israel, not so good for Palestinians. But finally, in the 11th of May of 1949, the US admitted Israel as a member, meaning Israel was now an independent state. However, there was one huge problem, which still has effect to this day. Over 762,000 Palestinians fled Israel during the war. And Israel, after the war, then implemented a bunch of laws that made it impossible for these Palestinians to come back to Israel and claim their land. So if you were out of if you were out of what was once Palestine, you were out of Israel. You could not go back to the land that you owned. It was no longer your land. You could not regain land, period, if you were Palestinian. So we reach this pretty big gap in my knowledge. There was a lot of armed conflicts between Israel and the other Arabic countries, especially at the borders. I know there was some guerrilla fighting, but I do not know a lot. So I would actually ask you, Red. I also know that you did your research. If you know anything about this time.
What after the what year are we in now? The 50 in the 50s.
Yeah, 50s and 60s.
I'll be honest, I don't really know. I didn't look into the past too much. I kind of more researched what was going on right now and what exactly caused this to happen, which is of course the eventual, which I'm guessing you also have. So I don't know if I should get into it, but the eventual existence of Hamas,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll get into
and of
that.
course all the consistent like terrorism essentially that Israel has been doing on Palestine, which is
Yeah.
just basically trying to, instead of like full force trying to be like, all right, now we're going to just massacre you all and just expel you out of our country.
Don't worry. They did that too, but we will get into
Yeah,
that.
but they have been like, at least in the last couple of years, been more of like it's that mixed in with like a scare tactic of like, we're gonna just scare the shit out of you until you kind
Don't
of
worry.
like
Don't worry. We'll get
decide
into
to
that.
leave. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to jump ahead a couple of years in 1968, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, another war occurred between Israel and the Arabic countries that surround it, called the Six Day War. And once again, the Arabic countries got their shit kicked in. At the end of this war, Israel didn't just conquer completely the Palestine settlements that they couldn't conquer before because they were on the borders of these countries. They conquered those settlements. They conquered land from Syria, Jordan, and a huge chunk from Egypt, which they kept for a long ass time. Now, it was only in 1978 that Israel returned the land to Egypt during the David Accords, which was so controversial that the Egyptian prime minister, the Egyptian prime minister was murdered over it. If I'm not mistaken, it was a prime minister. So we have reached this point where Israel is just owning everything that was once Palestinian, which led to a lot of discontent to the point where a terrorist organization known as the PLO was formed. I think you've heard of the PLO, haven't you?
Honestly, no.
Okay, shit. Because I don't know much about them either. I know that they were a far right terrorist organization that seeked to have complete control of Palestine. They committed a lot of terrorist attacks, and there was a lot of infighting to the point where there was a civil war. But finally, things subsided with these David Accords because the Palestinian territories of West Bank and Gaza were given a bit of autonomy. However, there was a huge ass problem. Jewish people were moving into these settlements and creating houses and communities and places to live in. So now the Palestinians saw themselves getting pushed out of their not only of their country but also of the small blobs of independence that they had been able to gather. So discontent was soaring through the roof. And this all led to something called the First Intifada, which means a revolt, if I'm not mistaken, which took place between 1987 and 1993. A lot of people got killed, a lot more got injured. And this was also the time when Hamas was created in Gaza. Now, Hamas was basically comprised of people that looked like the PLO and said, yeah, nah, you guys aren't doing enough. So, it's that type of group. Now, once again, the Israeli government and the Palestinian government looked at each other and said, we gotta do something. We gotta stop this somehow. And so they signed something called the Oslo Accords, which was meant to give a bit of liberty to the Palestinians, independence of the territories of West Bank and Gaza, at least for a bit, that could be ruled by their own political organizations called the Palestinian Authority, if I'm not mistaken. This did not go well. Both factions and their respective far right groups lost their mind. Hamas committed terrorist attacks during peace talks to try and sabotage the whole thing, whilst far right Israelis chanted and rioted, calling the prime minister a Nazi, to the point where he was assassinated shortly after the accords were signed. And this all turned everything for the worst, because after this, Israeli went completely into far right extremist policies. And now we arrive at the year 2000. Shit has kicked the fan. Shit has come from the fan, if you will. Shit, it's looking really bad.
There's shit
Both
everywhere.
the fan is made of shit.
Whoa.
Uh, both groups are incapable of achieving peace talks because they're being sabotaged by the extremist groups of Hamas and the far right of Israeli. And now the Israeli political landscape is far right. So there isn't much they could do. There is no political will for peace for Palestine. And so there is a second Antifada, which took place between 2000 and 2005, which changed the whole dynamic of things. A lot more people got injured, a lot more property was destroyed. And at this point, the Israeli government looked at Gaza and said, yeah, now let's withdraw from there. And Hamas established themselves as a governmental force and declared themselves separate from the West Bank and their own separated province, which caused another civil war. As a response, Israel enforced a blockade, a suffocating blockade, upon Gaza, which is still in effect to this day.
It's like the fucking most highly advanced and highly guarded like barrier or whatever you want to call it ever
Border.
created.
It is an open sky prison. Unemployment is at 40%. Water, sanitation, and electricity are given by the Israeli government and are taken away when they so please. People are made to leave their homes, leave their neighborhoods. Children are beaten by police, Israeli police. You cannot move outside of Gaza without a specific passport. You have no rights. You have no voting rights. You have no movement rights, and you cannot own land outside of Gaza.
Yeah,
It is an open sky prison.
and for example, I believe that currently there was a test done that showed that almost 98% of the water that is consumed in
Yes,
Palestine or in Gaza is poisoned,
it
or
is. It is.
not literally poisoned in the sense of like they're putting rat poison, but like
Yeah.
not it shouldn't be
It
drunk.
is not fit for human consumption.
And
It's
the current like population of Palestine, like almost 50% of them are like or below 18 years old.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
this is not because they are just really eager to have children, if you know what I mean. It's
They
because
didn't live long.
their life expectancy is so bad that most of them just don't live much longer than becoming adults.
When you can either die from disease, the police, the military, or the own extremist groups in your own country, you got a lot of problems. And so now I want to talk about Hamas and Gaza because I have seen this being discussed a lot, which is this idea that Hamas is completely separate from the rest of Palestine. It is not. Hamas is the governing body of Gaza. And I can see why.
Yeah.
Imagine waking up without a home, without parents, without family, living in dirt poor conditions, with food and water that is not right for consumption, with the possibility of getting beaten to death in the streets by the military of the country next door, where you can't even leave and you have no rights. And there is a group that governs this area that chants death to these oppressors.
Yeah.
I don't know if I wasn't a Palestinian child in those conditions if I wouldn't join Hamas.
Yeah,
The thing
that's
is, the conditions that these people live in is so inhumane that it's not that they are pushed. It's I can understand why they would turn to such violent, hateful, extremist groups. It is not to say that they are justified. They are not. What they do is horrendous. What they do is slaughter innocents, maim people, including babies. Literal babies in the Strip of Gaza have been killed and maimed by these forces. But I cannot turn a blind eye to the reality and the situation and the basically nature versus nurture. The nurture that led these people into these desperate, hateful conditions.
Yeah, I think that what most people forget is that Hamas was not, born out of a void. It was born out of almost a necessity to fight back. Of course, when you live in an apartheid, you are constantly harassed, terrorized, and you're treated like trash, right? You're not treated like a human being. You are treated as something that is, in this case, not even disposable, as something that they want to get rid of. And so, of course, it's natural that when a group that looks at the at the oppressor and says we need to exterminate them, we need to get rid of them. Of course, they're gonna support. Most people are going to support that group because how could they not? Because it's really the only way they see of getting out of that situation.
Yeah. Imagine like going to a guy coming to you and saying, "Hey, you know, that person over there, that person that is the cause for your miserable life and all your suffering, yeah, we hate that person too. Wanna fucking kill him?
The
And
place where people obviously get confused or caught up is because in the past it's something that we talked about before in previous episodes, which is, for example, one of the origins of anti-Semitism is this idea that Jewish people are the cause of all your problems, right? Which is something that people like Hitler try to sell the.
do you know who inspired Hitler? I told you this already today.
Yeah, go ahead, tell the viewers.
Henry Ford.
Yeah,
Henry Ford wrote the manual that Hitler was inspired by after he lost his mom and was kicked out of the art school.
that
He
goddamn art
had a
school.
life-size portrait of Henry Ford in his office.
I mean, Henry Ford was a capitalist piece of shit, so I'm not surprised. But
He wasn't just a piece of shit. He was an anti-Semitic anarchist, in the wrong sense of the worst, like the worst sense possible.
yeah, a right wing
Uh,
anarchist.
Egotistic, capitalist.
Yeah, and then of course, like you have to remember that being anti-Semitic is this idea that like Jewish people are this like devilish figure and all
Which
that.
is stupid.
Which again, but anti-Semitism is not born out of like an actual logical problem, right? It's not like it's
It's like
racism.
racism.
It's
It's born out of hate.
it's born out of hate. But that's the difference between this situation and then being a Palestinian and hating Israel. Because, yes, they're Jewish, but that is, in this scenario, a coincidence,
Irrelevant.
right? They just so happen to be. But or Hamas is, technically speaking, I wouldn't say that they might be anti Semitic. They probably are. If they would see a Jewish person in front of them, they would not care
They
if
want the eradication of Israel, so
they would
I
not
don't think
care if they're Israeli or not. They would just, kill them. However, their hatred towards them is not born out of being anti-Semitic. It is born out of them. It is born out of revenge, essentially.
they don't hate Israel because you're anti-Semitic. They hate Israel because fuck you.
And because they're being vengeful. They're taking essentially taking revenge for what Israel has done, and that's the thing that I think that a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people kind of misinterpret, at least from what I see on
We got
Twitter, on
aggressive
Instagram, and etc., is that
because they
people.
want Palestine to be the perfect victim.
And it's not just that. First of all, they want Palestine to be the perfect victim. Kind of what Ukraine has going on. This idea that Ukraine they're very sad and and they need help and oh my
I
god, the
mean, they are very good.
Ukrainians.
They need help, but
No, but they're like this idea of like they did nothing wrong, they did nothing to deserve this. They are just trying to fight back and stuff like that. Whilst what happened here is very different because if, for example, instead of Russia having invaded Ukraine, if, for example, Ukraine had attacked Russia because they
no, no.
thought,
Before that, Ukraine was a part of Russia, and they wanted to get the fuck out.
yeah, if for example Ukraine invaded or started bombarding, let's say Crimea, uh,
Oh, guys.
they they wouldn't have been, they wouldn't be seen the same way, right? They would
Like
have.
there is a great example given by a Jewish speaker that basically presented this as imagine if Israel was populated by Arabic people and the Palestinians were actually Jewish. There would be no problem at all. There would be no talks of anti-Semitism because it's not even close. It's not discrimination towards Arabic people. It's Arabic people committing terrible atrocities and these people fighting back. Like, for example, let's grab the apartheid state in South Africa and Nelson Mandela. He started by fighting peacefully, and when that didn't work, they resorted to violence to try and kick out this colonial power that had its hands around the throat of his people, to the point where he was on the FBI terrorist watch list until 2008, even after he was democratically elected.
Yeah. And
So,
they said that they would basically take them out of that list if he admitted or publicly condemned the actions of what
and
was happening.
denounced communism,
Yeah, and denounced communism and socialism because
which he said, fuck you, because he was a
fuck
baller.
you, suck my.
Yeah. So let's look at our personal history as Portugal. How many times have we been invaded and kicked the shit out of our invaders?
Yeah.
Like,
And how
okay,
many times have we invaded before?
yeah, that too.
We are inclusive. We like to get
We
invaded
are
and
dicks.
invade.
We were the original colonizers. We are dicks.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we were literally the original colonizers. So yeah,
Okay,
there's. I think that the thing
yeah.
that a lot of people are missing out on is that what is happening in Palestine is not Hamas committing terrorism attacks. Whilst that is what is being sold, that is not what is happening. What is
I mean, they
happening
sure are committing atrocities.
what is happening is not like what happened during the kind of in the middle of the 2010s in Europe, where there were people who were part of terrorist groups, I believe, who were getting into an airport and letting a bomb off. There's very different things. What is happening here is you're in apartheid, where one group, the majority, the one in control, the one who doing the oppression, is consistently attacking one side, and then the other one is fighting back, which, in my knowledge, is a war. When there's an
Yes.
offensive and then a
However,
counter-offensive, that is a war.
however,
Those are
and I
not those are not terrorist attacks, right?
there is one huge fucking problem, which is that Hamas has absolutely been committing atrocities and been fighting war with terror, which is the definition of a terrorist attack. Not the
Yeah.
popular perception that we have of one, but it is. They massacred thousands of people in the strip of Gaza. Once again, they beheaded men, women, children, elderly, babies, and maimed their bodies. There was one case of one person whose grandma was murdered and slaughtered, and her murderer grabbed her phone, posted a video of him committing the act to the Facebook of that person. And that's how the family of that elderly woman found out that she had been slaughtered.
Jesus Christ.
Those are absolutely acts of terror.
Yeah.
Let's not forget. The cause that they're fighting for is just is to kick off an oppressing group that's had their hand around their throat for decades. Their methods are
Or horrendous.
inhumane.
Yeah. But then there's, of course, the I wouldn't call it a counter argument, because it isn't. But the other fact, the fact of the other side, which is everything that we just said, Israel is doing too.
Exactly. That is why they both fucking suck. And that's why we're not pro Israel or pro Hamas. We are pro Palestine. Because those innocent people that have had their lives completely turned around by an apartheid state have done absolutely nothing to deserve it. And the innocents are always the ones that get fucked. Both the innocent Israelites and also the innocent Palestinians.
Yeah, it's in that sense it's very complicated. Again, I mean,
War is hell. And this time, this war is being fought by devils on both sides.
yeah. But again, you have to. I think there's a huge sentiment which we talked about in the beginning of the episode, which is this idea that you either support a terrorist group or you support Israel. First of all, supporting Israel, you're supporting a far
Fucking
right,
terrorist group.
Zionist, fascist apartheid, which is everything that's bad.
Yeah.
Right? I
I
don't.
actually want to get into that. Give me a second, because we haven't discussed the current living conditions of the Palestinians living in actual West
West
Bank and
Bank.
Gaza.
Yeah, that's true. That's horrendous. That is.
Okay, so here
Holy
I
shit.
come. Why is it apartheid? Okay, so I have a checklist here. Let me hit you with it.
Oh boy.
Let's. Palestinians in Gaza have no rights and are under military rule. Palestinians in West Bank also have no political or civil rights in Israel. Palestinians in East Jerusalem can't vote in Israelite elections and can have their rights to move revoked. They are barred from Palestinian politics as well. And Palestinians that live in Israel are restricted to where when it comes to the places that they can live. If you look at West Bank, you have these little blobs of Palestinian communities surrounded by Israeli territory. Those little blobs of Palestinian communities are surrounded by borders and patrol and guards with guns, and you can't move out of them without specific um, authorizations. There is no way for you to have a direct link with other Palestinian communities. You are systematically oppressed and live under a military rule that treats you worse than garbage.
And
That is the conditions that these people live in.
just like during a couple decades ago, if they leave West Bank, if they leave those
Exactly.
communities, if they leave those areas, they can't get back in.
Yeah,
They're
they
basically
have
locked out and they lose
systematically,
everything.
systematically they have their house ownership revoked. They are made to leave their neighborhoods so that they can be replaced by Israeli ones.
Yeah,
Their lives is are that of no possession, or the idea that everything you own and you that you are can be taken away in an instant.
I saw this clip, which is so sad, of like this Palestinian person basically confronting somebody that you could tell is American. First, because of purely appearance, they're a very the most pastiest of white, looking conservative looking person you could ever imagine, and of course the
Oh yeah, I
American
can see the
accent.
type.
And then seeing them basically living in the house of the house which was once owned by that Palestinian, or who rightfully owns that house, and basically the Palestinian basically being like you're in my house, you have stolen my house, like you have taken my house away from me. Because if you didn't know, when you basically want to move into Israel, if you're from the United States, you're basically like you're state sponsored, like you're sponsored
Yeah.
by the United States to go live there, like it's basically
If you are
free.
Jewish, I encourage you.
Yeah, and so basically, this Palestinian person is like confronting this American, and the American is just there like, yeah, like what am I supposed to do? Like I can't do anything. Like I'm just living my life. Like I'm just, I'm doing what I like. I'm doing what is rightfully like mine to do in his eyes, right? And then
It's
it's
such a piece of shit argument
it just shows an argument. It's not even an argument. It's just an
and
excuse at that point.
justification and a justification for the self.
It's in his eyes, he's what he's doing is perfectly okay and does not have any empathy for this Palestinian person. That's the
Yeah.
issue, and that video is so depressing because just the implication of myself being in that situation, I don't even know what I would do. I would just beg for mercy. Like, what else can you do in that situation, right?
Well, I have an idea of what I would do. I would either beg for mercy or, well, you know.
Uh, give him nice, gentle pats on the head.
And that's exactly how these extremist movements begin. These people don't want to live in these conditions. The cruelty of their situation and their lives is thrusted upon them in a way that is devoid of all humanity. And then people get surprised when they fight back and become hateful and commit atrocities. You want to stop these atrocities? Give them fucking rights. Treat them as human beings. Let them have homes.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, the Israeli Palestinian conflict was fought because one group of people wanted to get back to the community and the nation that was once theirs, whilst another wanted to protect the country that was already theirs.
yeah. When you
And
really,
for it,
sorry,
hundreds of thousands died and millions suffered. It is not right. It is not human. It should not be possible. But here we are. And now you look at these people that have had their land taken from them, their rights, and everything else, and you say, nah, I side with the other guys. How the fuck can you do that?
Yeah, it's. I think that there's a lot of like social media and sort of like consistent propaganda, sort of like brainwashing that goes into that because there's definitely a lot of people who,
Yeah,
first of all, there's a lot of people who hate anything that has to do with Islam. They see Islam as like this sort of, yeah, at least if definitely if you're like from the U.S. and a lot of countries in Europe, you definitely see Islam as like
which is once again fucking stupid. But
this
once again,
horrendous like super extremist religion, which everybody there is just a bunch of uh, like fascists or whatever. I don't know. I don't
I
know
have
because
a friend
I don't
that
know
is
because I'm not
practicing.
like that, so I can even kind of put
Like,
myself in that position to kind of imagine what you think of it. But yeah,
I,
go
I
on.
have a friend that is a practicing Muslim that lives in a Muslim country, and I've had a lot of talks with him to know how his religion works. And one of the things he told me is that a lot of these countries and extremist groups grab two completely separate passages of the Quran and use one to justify the other, ignoring completely the whole section that claims that your actions are fucking wrong and immoral because that's how dictatorships work. That is not the core belief. Those are extremist groups. It's as if like an Arabic person looked at a white dude and said, "Holy shit, it's Hitler." Because a lot of these people looked at Arabic people and said, "Oh my god, it's Osama bin Laden."
Yeah. I think that definitely when it comes to the US, I think that's number one. The problem there is that in the early 2000s with Bush, there's definitely a lot of, in the same way that they completely disgusted and oppose socialism or any leftist ideology because of Red Scare propaganda. And then in the early 2000s, with this consistent idea with 9/11, with this kind of scare propaganda of like if you're Muslim, you are a terrorist. There's a reason why, for example, when 9/11 happened and all that, the number of amount of like reports of abuse towards Islamic people or descendants of people who from Islamic
People that
countries,
looked like they were
yeah,
Muslims.
or people thought they looked like they were Islamic, was went up a lot. At the same, a very similar thing happened with COVID-19. When COVID-19 started spreading, the number of amount of hate crimes that happens with
Asian people.
Asian people went up because they saw this Asian person, and then of course, yeah, that's logical that if because they're Asian, they must have this disease, which is just the most insane, like logic that you can have. So of course, yeah, there's that. Then of course, there's this idea that if you oppose Jewish people in any way, you are anti-Semitic. When you put these two things together, it's very easy to comprehend that if on one side, if you hate Jewish people, or if you oppose Jewish people in any way, then you are anti-Semitic. It's very hard to oppose Israel. And then on the other hand, you see that there are a bunch of extremist Muslim people doing these things. When two and two to come together, it's for most Americans and for a lot of people who are, kind of been brainwashed by those fears. It's very kind of easy in quotes to comprehend how they come to that conclusion. But of course, if none of those things are, if you aren't just scared shitless by somebody that's Islamic because you were brainwashed since you were a child, and if you understand that opposing an apartheid doesn't mean that you are anti-Semitic, it is completely just mind-boggling how you can come to that idea that either you support Israel or you support a terrorist group.
Yeah.
So
This topic hit me pretty hard.
hit you in the
As
feels,
I
man.
wa- as I was researching, I kept messaging Red with depressing messages, which became increasingly more alarming to the point where I was just going completely nihilistic. I even messaged a friend of mine. We didn't. God isn't dead because he never fucking existed.
What?
Um,
Oh,
it
okay.
wasn't you. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah, I know, I know. I would remember it.
Yeah. So
Although you have said that to me before, so
I have said that to you. It's one of my
many
trademarks.
times, many times. I've heard that phrase many times.
It's pretty base, if I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah,
But let's.
I think if it wasn't the last blog you wrote before this one or the one before that, I'm pretty sure that pretty much every time you do research on a blog that's about something along these lines, when it comes to like mistreatment of human beings, you just like every weekend you just go through this like insanely like depressed vibe where you're like fucking kill me. This
It's not
is
fucking
horrendous.
kill me. I'm about to fucking kill people, which I won't. I won't. I have morals that stop me from doing that, and these things called laws and the respect for human life. At least some of them.
The
Um,
consequences to your actions.
shush. Uh, there were no consequences if they catch me. If they
Oh
don't
shit.
catch me.
If they don't
Uh,
catch me, I can do whatever I want.
but it hit me pretty hard because at the end of the day, it's a group of people who has lost their right to live, the right to a human life. And in my household, I live in a pretty leftist household. My grandparents were from both sides of my family were part of a revolutionary movements before when our dictatorship was still active. And I have pretty frequent debates with them. I like listening to their stories, their opinions. Sharing blog topics is a good way for me to run through my notes. And one thing that I've always heard from my grandmother is I fully support Palestine. And I was like, yeah, me too. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And this with the beginning of this war and the writing of this blog, I have had the opportunity to research and form my own opinions.
And you came to the
And
conclusion
I
that wait, it's the same.
and I
Oh
came
my
to the
god.
conclusion that my granny is fucking based. That and that the reality that these types of crimes against humanity still happens to this day disgusts me to a level where I feel my blood boil. I am more than saddened. I'm fucking distraught. Because at the end of the day, these are people. They think, they feel, they have hopes and dreams, lives that could be lived in peace and harmony and happiness with their loved ones. And they have that taken away from them simply because they they were born in the wrong place at the wrong time. And what brain process do you need to have to look at these people and say, nah, I don't care? I just received a message. Currently, there are occurring very big protests pro Palestine in London.
Yeah,
So,
and
shout outs to my granny, just gave me a pamphlet saying exactly that.
and I think was it New York too, I believe.
Which it gives me a small hint of hope. But then I look at
There was a
France, which
yeah.
banned the protest, and I want to, I hate Macron. I hate the French. I fucking hate the French. The only thing that I like about the French is one, the revolution. Two, Napoleon, because he was funny. He wasn't funny. He was interesting. And three,
But he was a piece of
the
shit.
yeah, he was a piece of shit. And three, the
I,
the fields of Verdun, the Battle of Verdun during World War One, and the phrase "they shall not pass," which was used by the French during 300 days of fighting, which is pretty baller. Besides that, fuck the French.
I like how you almost struggled to find a third good thing about France. Tell me three good things about France.
Croissants,
Baguettes,
Baguettes. Yeah, fuck it.
funny hats,
I hear that Versailles is pretty cool, and so is the Louvre.
and it's mid. I don't know. I don't care
Never been
much
before.
about monuments. I don't know. I'm that type of person that's like,
Oh,
oh
I
look,
like museums. I like museums
it's
and
a
monuments.
huge arch with some pretty delicate and intricate sculptures on the sides.
Yeah, but they put John Wick over there.
Yeah, that's it, huh? That's good to know. But
Yeah, I do like monuments. Besides that, I don't like France.
yeah, it's a pretty racist, pretty racist nation. Always have been.
Yeah,
That's kind of their
yeah,
whole spiel.
yeah. Even with the French Revolution, they looked at ethnic minorities in this little group called women and said, "Fuck you."
Yeah, but I think that I kind of want to. You kind of talked about Nelson Mandela and the South African apartheid, and I kind of want to do
Another topic that I really need to research upon.
a little kind of yeah, same, a little I don't know, just an interesting thought for people to have, which is the comparison between the South African apartheid and the Israeli apartheid, which is that during the South African apartheid, white people, right, the ones who were in this case the oppressors, still needed black people to be able to use them basically as
Labor,
low income labor, right? Basically, they would do what white people didn't want to do.
slavery without the S.
Yeah. With the Israeli apartheid, that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, they
There's
are just they
Israeli
are
Israel.
actively trying not to commit genocide.
Yeah, they were actively trying. They're just trying to kick them out. They just want them gone. Like there's no.
Yeah,
They see absolutely no necessity for them to exist, which
yeah.
is scary because it's like, wow, okay, holy fuck. Which is why, like, when you start looking
Yeah.
at the stats, whilst what, as we mentioned before, what Hamas has done is completely horrendous. But then if you want to look at like purely statistic, like through statistics, when you compare the amount of basically genocide that Israel has been doing in comparison to how much Hamas has been doing, is like, holy shit, these are rookie numbers.
I just thought of something which is fucking ironic. The Jewish people wanted to go back to Israel because their country was denied to them, and now the people of Israel are denying Palestine to Palestinians.
I mean, yeah, like
What the fuck?
the Israeli leader Ben Netanyahu is basically he's a fascist. Like he thinks me and Alpha.
Holocaust welcome to Muslims.
Yeah, me and Alpha were talking about this when we this morning, and we were saying how like he is a Holocaust revisionist, which is not the same as a
I didn't
Holocaust
even know that
denier,
was a thing.
which means that he thinks that apparently that Hitler was influenced by this Islamic terrorist group. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know from
I
which
have
country,
no clue.
and that was what caused Hitler's hatred towards Jewish people. So in Ben's mind. It always has to be a fucking Ben. It always has to be a far right Jewish Ben.
Yeah, fucking Ben
Jewish
Shapiro. Yes.
so like he thinks that Hitler only wanted to do genocide to Jewish people because of Islam, which is why
Mm,
he tries to justify his actions or some shit like that. So it's like
uh,
what the fuck? So yeah,
Like we look back at history, and over the course of the centuries, Muslims have been consistently a lot nicer than the fucking church.
yeah, and they have consistently been fucked over by all of us. Like
And
every
oh,
colonial power has consistently fucked them,
like
like over decades.
medicine, thank them. Architecture, that too. Math, holy shit.
We use their numbers. Like
We use their numbers.
yeah, it's like it's crazy how that's why it's like of course, no, everybody is going to be scared. Like everybody got scared. Definitely. Like I was talking about this today with a friend, which is, for example, when I used to still live in Belgium in 2016, uh, there was in March 22nd, I believe, there was two terrorist attacks the same day, like couple minutes apart. One in the Brussels airport and one still in
Yeah.
Brussels, but in subway stations. And I did not live near Brussels. I was about like 50 kilometers away from it, so I was perfectly fine. I did live in the general vicinity of an hospital, and it was definitely weird to hear so many ambulances out of nowhere. We're like, what the fuck is happening? Why is there so
Well,
many
I had
ambulances?
family in Brussels at that time, and they were on the airport.
And so basically, suddenly getting calls from your family being like, "Is everything okay?" And you're like, "I
Yeah,
think so.
that
I don't
is
know."
exactly what happened with us. Like
And
we were
so, and
we
s-
were frantically
basically,
calling them.
and seeing that a bunch of people were doing suicide bombing. It's in the country that you live in, not that far away from you. It's like, whoa, that is holy shit.
I'm
That's
still
scary.
expecting our return.
But then, of course, there's the kind of your interpretation or how you deal with that information. And I can definitely tell, and this is a fact, which is something that I could write a blog on, which is in the last couple of years, the amount of far right movements in Belgium has gone way up. And currently, it seems like in the next elections that Belgium might become a far right country
Oh my fucking
in
god!
Europe, which
Belgium and Holland. It's always Belgium and Holland.
and so, which is funny because Belgium has always typically been less
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
Emphasis
That's a
on the less bad than
racist
others.
older.
But and mostly it's because the current, the current far right group is basically doing the exact same idea of like, we have to kick out the Muslims, we have to kick out the foreigners, all that same bullshit. And as I mentioned in the end of the last episode, as a person who has a very close Muslim friend, in this case, literally who has parents who moved to Belgium and etc. So he is almost the exact type of person that people like that want to kick out. It is to me completely incomprehensible that I could ever look at my friend and be like, "Yeah, fuck you, get out of this country." And I think that is also one of the reasons why when those attacks happened, for example, I never saw it as like a display that Islam was a threat because I had consistent and daily contact with an Islamic person, and at no point did I ever feel threatened or afraid.
Do you
In fact, he is one
threatened
of
by
my
my
nicest
presence?
friends that I've ever met. So like, could not know a more peaceful and even in some surprising ways very progressive friend. So it's fucked. It's a matter of how you kind of
All of this is say it is so fucked.
yeah.
Like
So
ah
I don't know. It's first of all, it's an issue of generalization, right? This idea that if one person does this, or in this case,
they're all
if an
different.
extremist
Like
group, which is easily associated with a non-extremist group, is is then seen this general group is then seen as an issue, and you can see this, for example, in the U.S., where consistently, leftist movements are shut down because they are immediately, grouped up with leftist anarchist movements, which are not like, or which is, leftist anarchism is basically just extremist leftism, right? This idea that's like no government and all that, and like just start killing people until we get that, which is funny because like most leftist people don't agree with that anyways. So that's one example where the US consistently does the exact same thing. If it's just take an extremist group, use that to represent a larger group, and then say it's bad.
yeah,
When you can't do that, like you can, it happens. So you're not physically incapable of it, but it is not something that you should. It's not correct to do that. You
it's
should
not moral.
You should always look at the facts. You should also always try to, uh, of course, do your own research. If you hear a consistent sort of argument that is seen as the status quo, and then you kind of question yourself: Is this true? Is this how it actually is? Is a good way to kind of not let yourself fall into that rabbit hole of believing that every Islamic person is a terrorist, believing that every leftist person is this anarchist who just wants to kill rich people, which there are some, but of course they're a minority. Although we do joke about eating the rich, but we're not literally eating.
I would never eat rich.
We're not going to literally start doing cannibalism on rich people. And
That would
so
sound
pretty bad. I mean, they pump themselves up with random chemicals and all these
and
like
and blood.
yeah, they do like these age what do we call it, like de aging
Yeah.
chemical stuff. So they probably won't even be that tasty because they're full pumped up with like synthetic shit. So
Baby, fucking,
uh
you know what I'm talking about? Like baby scrotum injections in your face.
oh bro, or that one weird rich guy who gets blood transfusions from his son, and he's
Yeah,
like
that's what I was talking about.
and he's like 50, and he's convinced that he looks like he's in his 20s, but he looks like a 50-year-old guy. I don't know who the fuck is lying to him. I don't know who's writing
The
his
level of
dick, but like the level of dick writing is crazy.
I don't like the use of dick writing in that sentence, seeing as though we talked about his son.
I mean, his son is an adult, so it'll still be incest, but that's not who. I don't think it's his son. Probably doesn't have much choice, and
Okay,
unfortunately,
what the,
probably needs his dad's riches to be able to get
okay,
anything
okay.
done
Stop,
because
stop,
nepotism.
stop. We are no longer having this conversation.
Which is another issue. Nepotism. I mean, depends. There's uh, well executed nepotism, and then there's incorrectly executed nepotism. Of course, nepotism always takes away opportunities from people, from other people. However, if you have a family-owned business and you employ your son, that's not exactly going to be frowned upon.
Apple baby. Ah,
What?
I'm sorry. Uh,
However, if you are a politician and all the people you choose to be your fellow prime ministers or whatever is just your family members, yeah, that's a little icky.
hello, I am the president. The vice president is my wife.
Yeah, you've talked about it, House of Cards or whatever the fuck that's called.
Yeah, I love that.
So I've seen a lot. There's oh god, on TikTok I keep getting like a bunch of clips from either House of Cards or like this one clip from apparently Kevin Spacey was in like a Call of Duty game or some shit.
Yeah, he was playing Call of Duty in House of Cards.
He like no, he like is a character in Call of Duty.
Okay, what the fuck?
Like he is some sort of like in the campaign of one of them. God knows how many Call of Duty games there are.
There
He
are so
plays
many.
like the president, I think, or some shit like that too, or like this,
Yeah, that
or
checks
no, it's not a
out.
president. It's not a president. It's like he's like the owner of like this military, kind of Arasaka type vibes. I think that's a good.
Cyberpunk.
Like
It
you'll
never
get
really
you'll
was.
understand it. Maybe the viewers won't understand what that means, but like yeah, basically he's like the leader of like this super powerful like military company, right? Like military contractor or whatever. And he has like these big speeches of like democracy, no, like people, democracy is a lie, and it's like this very. I think the best way to kind of explain it is he's basically like this capitalist anarchist, right? Like, he's like this idea of like uh fuck the rules. Like I'm a military guy. I want the world to be in war because that's the way it should be. Because I
It's
don't know.
like Lord of War with Nicolas Cage.
It's some dumb shit, and I keep seeing like a bunch of like edits on that, and I'm like, ugh,
You
this
should
is
watch House
so
of Cards.
cringe.
I think you would like it.
I would watch what?
House of Cards.
I don't know. I'm not into. I can't be asked to watch that type of stuff. It's weird because like I'm every day
Pretty good.
I'm so consistently like bombarded with like political bullshit, it's my fault because I'm the one who like puts myself through it. But then when I'm watching a TV series, the last thing I want to watch is something that's realistic. I only
Yeah,
I only watch sci-fi and superhero movies and
because
shows.
it's way too unrealistic.
It's call
And
me
we
call me a nerd or whatever, or call me like a basic bitch to only want to watch films about like fantastical shit. But I don't know. It's just more fun to me. I can't be. I'm
well,
not gonna watch a romance or this super depressing like political show. It's like I'd rather watch The Boys, which is all about murder and
we-
shit, and there's exploding penises, but there's also amazing social commentary behind it, and it's
well,
consistently
just
putting a
like the
middle finger
boys,
up to capitalism.
just like the boys do to the superheroes, it's time that we put down this podcast because it's been running for a long ass time, and
Yeah,
we have your topic.
might be the longest episode yet. I'm not sure on that one. It's definitely longer
And
than the
it's
9/11 one.
a good place to spend the longest episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a very interesting episode. But anyways, if you want more content from us, don't forget to support us on Patreon, like we said in the beginning of the episode. And of course, if you do support us on Patreon, it is in this exact section where we get to answer your questions on the podcast Q&A. However, yeah, we don't have supporters yet, so we don't have questions. But
Yeah,
if you support today, you might just be the first Q to our A.
I'm gonna throw myself off a cliff now. Uh,
Go ahead.
everyone, have a nice day or a nice evening. Be good people, and
Yeah,
remember, fight for the rights of others and yours.
and have basic fucking human decency for the love of God. And also, we see, well, Jesus, I'm slurring my words now.
And the
And,
episode.
and we'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.